I want to talk a little bit about someone today who sort of started in the shadows and found his way to the light. And this person is Tony Robbins. Robbins grew up in poverty, but he was helped by a stranger, and this began his need and want to help others. He works as someone who organizes seminars for motivational speakers, or at least he used to before becoming a successful businessman. He worked with multiple presidents such as Bill Clinton, George Bush, Barack Obama. But in the 1980s, he started to notice that he had a lot of skills and value that he could use to help other people. And so he started hosting his own seminars. In later years, this was used increasingly focused on financial success and tailored services specifically to entrepreneurs and business owners and wealthy people. But his seminars are known beyond that. They're known for their energy, their humor, and their interactive nature. And so I just sort of wanted to touch a little bit on those key aspects today. I've learned 3 skills from the speeches by Tony Robbins. The first is that variation in speed while speaking is powerful. The second is there's a multitude of ways that you can engage an audience. And the third is that when we use hand gestures, we can't just do it to talk. We need to use them in a powerful way. And I'll sort of dive into all of these in a little bit, but let's start with the tone variation. Tony Robbins uses this variation sort of like a conversational speed to engage the ears of his audience. As he tells a story, Tony tends to change pace. For instance, a famous story he's known for telling is this Thanksgiving story where his family had no food. They had nothing really going for them on this big day where everyone is super grateful for all that they have, and he didn't have that. And as a man came up to his house and started offering food to his family, his father said no. His father said, "We will not take any charity from you." And after a while, his father did agree to take the charity, but I think it's just that the way that his father was wanting to provide for his family is what was holding him back. And as you can see, the way I was telling that story had a fast pace and a slow pace. And as I talk faster, people are more inclined to lean in and sort of pay attention and fully understand everything that I am trying to say. But as I slow down, as I pause, it gives people a minute to think, gives them a minute to understand and digest what I'm really saying. And also, this speed variation comes with pitch variation. If I were to say everything in monotone, which Tony never does, then it would be really boring for somebody to listen to what I'm saying. For someone with hour-plus long talks, Robbins is challenged usually with holding the attention of his audience, which is where his use of engagement and strategies comes into play. That's lesson number 2, ways to engage the audience. He engages his audience in physical ways, such as walking. He walks all the way around wherever he is speaking. He has a casual stance. He's not standing up there like a stick, but it's actually shown to be more effective. And this is a skill that he really utilizes, which is to speak to an audience like you're talking to a friend. Not only will this help you as the speaker with jitters, but it ends up being more conversational based, which improves engagement. Robbins tends to walk through these audience rows, and as he's doing this, he's talking to people. He's having these conversations. And one way that he incorporates this is with his eye contact, and I'm talking more than a glance. If you're a student or you often attend large talks, then you might understand what I'm talking about here, which is when someone is teaching, let's say it's the professor, and they make eye contact with you. I'm not talking just a crossover on their way to look somewhere else, but I mean they're talking and they lock eyes with you. They are talking and giving this speech to you. Doesn't that make you inclined to nod and take in all of what they're saying? That the solid and strong eye contact holds the listener responsible for that information. And it actually improves their ability to understand all of the material. Because if you're a student, you feel like they're going to ask you a question. You're trying to get all of this information. But if you're just there to listen, then you're like, this is super important because he's dialing into me. Another form of engagement that Robbins incorporates is more of an interactive piece. His interactions go beyond jokes and eye contacts, but he casually speaks with people, and this is something increasing the credibility in listening. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but let's say I were to stand up here and just list off a million large words. You would immediately stop listening. A casual talk is a conversational talk, which allows Robbins to deliver his speeches in a way that resonates with his audience. There's two types of audience engagement. The first is the kind that makes your audience think. This would be more like mental engagement. And the second is the kind that makes them act. This is physical engagement. Mental engagement might include asking questions, long pauses, asking them to picture themselves in a certain situation that you're describing. Physical engagement is a little different, and it might include a physical action for the audience to participate in or an activity for the audience to complete. My favorite skill that Robbins possesses is his ability to focus on physical engagement by asking questions with a hand raise and say I. I love that he does say I. And as more people catch on throughout his speech, they start to scream it. He encourages this participation with the repetition of say I, because the audience can anticipate what to say. And so with minimal room for mistakes, you can have the maximum participation. This engagement also avoids passive listening, because people are more likely to be engaged. When am I supposed to say I? When am I supposed to give this response to what question? And it actually can involve stopping zoning out and stopping the inevitable cause of somebody losing 90% of the information. Stepping aside from engagement with the audience, I want to dive into Tony Robbins' body language, in particular his use of hand gestures. He uses hand gestures with purpose. And one way he does this is so he doesn't distract from his talk, but he influences and improves his talk. I think everyone's heard a public speaking professor or just someone who often gives presentations mention hand gestures while presenting. I know I've mentioned it a couple times, even speech consulting in the speaking center. And yes, hand gestures are super good. They allow the audience to visually understand what is being said. For instance, I'm someone who can't just listen to somebody talking. I need to read lips, or I need to read their body language to understand what is important in what they're saying and what I need to write down. Otherwise, I take a really long time to process what's being said. However, with an excess in body language, the speaker's no longer emphasizing a point. They're just waving their arms around like crazy. And so Tony Robbins does a great job at using his hand gestures with a purpose. These minimal gestures put emphasis on these main ideas and key takeaways, and they visually demonstrate what he's explaining, which allows the audience to sort of have multiple ways to catch up, which goes back to our speed variation that I mentioned earlier. Tony Robbins is a speaker possessing qualities that I try to embody in many of my speeches. By varying his speed in his presentations and engaging the audience and purposefully using these effective hand gestures, Robbins is able to connect his audience with his message. Robbins' mastery of body language and vocal delivery can serve as a valuable guide to anybody who's seeking to improve their public speaking skills. The lessons that I've learned from studying Tony Robbins' speeches has impacted my unique style to be more of a collective and stronger speaker. And I hope that you all can learn a little bit from him as well. Thank you.